reasoning, but not based on experiment, not based on the careful study of repetition experiment. And so when the modern scientific revolution occurred, he argued that it was based very much on the permeation of Christian, Jewish principles into the scientific world, and that created a different atmosphere for cooperation and politeness and so forth. He also pointed out that the transition of the universities in England in the 19th century made them very secular in their orientation. That's why I come up this point here. Today we have National Academy of Sciences and various groups that have panels that give grants and come out with things. But I've noticed the appointments on these panels can be very biased, and they can instrument and correlate a certain viewpoint. For example, to call carbon dioxide in the atmosphere a pollutant is contrary to science. We need it for the plants. And yet they talk about it as an atmospheric pollutant. Is it causing global warming? We're not sure. But the point is, I like to see open and fair investigation, and we're not seeing that with respect to grants. People who are on the wrong side of an official policy are not going to get the grants. That accrues with Alzheimer's research, for example, vaccination in connection with autism. These things are very closely controlled now because there's a certain in-class, in-horse, very dogmatic principles operating at the higher levels of science. That's what I'm trying to say. I'd like to leave that point where science has become very dogmatic in contrast to religion of several hundred years ago. You want to take on that, or someone?
Well, science, as I like to say of KU information technology, it's a human invention and therefore fallible. And one can say that more widely of the natural sciences and the social sciences and others, that they are human activities. And therefore, whereas we can talk about what my colleagues do as natural scientists in terms of a pure scientific method, we can certainly, and here I feel more confident, we can talk about it as a social phenomenon. And there's something called the business of science, which scientists sometimes teach to our honor students and others, that have to do with all of those social and sociological things that you're talking about, because it is still a human activity. And when you're talking about grants, you're talking about resources. And as I, as a political scientist, know, resources and allocation thereof is a political question, not a scientific one. And so you will see those two things, of course, intersect in all kinds of ways. That doesn't detract from the integrity of the scientific method. It doesn't detract from the integrity of scientifically derived findings, but it does speak to what we would call the sociology of the discipline or the business of the discipline, which is a very different question. Does it have an impact on what kinds of findings are found? Of course it does. Yes,
I'd like to wait until after we're done answering.
They're not touching this. They think the NIH is listening.
Oh, sure. It's not disrespectful to you all. I have a background in social sciences as well as a variety of faiths, anthropology, biology, Sufism, Christianity. I taught Buddhist meditation. I've had energy healing training. I have a background in music and the arts. So I guess the way I look at things is pretty holistic and pretty global. So I'll ask this question in a way that makes sense. So I'm wondering, considering that here we have people that represent views that are very, what some people would call Western, European, or Turkey isn't exactly Europe, but
they want to be.
Technically speaking, but I'm wondering, considering that there's so many other religions and so many other cultures that have different ways of relating to the earth and ways of relating to God and to other people, and also speaking from my own perspective that a lot of our arguments seem to be not just about what we believe, but how we believe that land should be used, because we all need to eat, we all have basic things, and sometimes religion or science or something else can be just another way to argue and to keep from cooperating, because we see what's going on and we have to cooperate and do those things. So how do each of you see being able to incorporate what you know about how you bring together science and religion and faith with cooperating with people from other cultures? because, for example, I don't see any indigenous people on your, I mean, indigenous to different places, but with all due respect, sir, you know, you're Muslim, but there are also IIDSA, there are other people from other beliefs in your country, there are people that are Lakota and people from other faiths, even just in this institution. And I'm wondering, how do you see, using what you learn here and how you bring these things together to operate people from other cultures, we even see science in a different way. You know, how does each of you see this? And this isn't just with your brain. I'm feeling to your heart here. I'd really like to know, because that's how we learn, is by sharing these things. So please, I mean, I know it's maybe a difficult question, but please touch it gently and answer it. You know, thank you.
Let's just go quickly.
Just quickly, thank you, and there's a lot in there. So,
Yeah.
But first of all, I think all of us are you know, here because we were invited to do so, and there's no principle of exclusion at work. It's and so obviously in doing what we're doing and trying to open discussion and between groups that maybe have not always been in discussion, between areas of inquiry, if you want to put it that way, or separate magisteria, as Stephen Jay Gould would put it. You know, this is just a beginning that has to continue, and I think it might be the hope of the organizers that this would continue in all the parts of everybody's lives here, no matter, you know, whatever their particular influences are, their communities and their, you know, wherever, their workplaces, their faith traditions. So I think we have to see this as a starting point and an invitation to continue, you know, rather than this is the final word. And the other point that struck me as you were beginning to speak is just in thinking about things like land use or motivating, you know, working together for common cause. I think here again, I always think about the richness and variety of religious traditions, and that all of our traditions, even if, you know, Christianity is always, it's kind of seen by the environmental movement as like, in a way, being responsible for promoting a culture of environmental, of callousness towards the environment. You know, because if you read Genesis 1, it says that, you know, humans were given dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, and you know, and while that's certainly been an influence on Christian attitudes, there's also a whole other, there are other ways of reading that, both in the past and in the present, that where Christians have seen a great responsibility to the earth, and so, like, there's an ecological tradition that's running through there, even if it's been not the primary one, and I'm guessing that that's true of all of our traditions. And so, like, what I'm trying to say is that there are resources there in all our traditions to be mobilized in pursuit of a common cause. So bringing in other voices where perhaps it's been more prominent might be a way of inviting our traditions to, you know, those represented here to recover what's in their own tradition as well. So I think there's lots of fruitful possibilities there.
There's a Quranic statement says that they eat, drink, but do not waste. So that's a very short and very compact, yet a very big and wide statement. So which means that I can drink as I need. You know, if my let's say the daily allowance is 1 glass of water, so that is you know what I take it. You know, I shouldn't just gather what will happen tomorrow with the tons of, you know, the gallons of, you know, the water in my backyard, and then eating the same thing, for example. Eat and then drink, do not waste. Always consider the others, because listen, the earth is a kind of, you know, the guest house. In the guest house, everybody is guest. For example, we are guests here, right? In the different faith, different names, different traditions, and everybody is very nice and very kind to one another. But nobody is just fighting over the one chair in front of us, or the one microphone, or 1 glass of water. And we are just living the 10 minutes later, and then everybody will just go about their business, right? So we forget about that, as if that we are going to live in this earth forever, and I would like to live as much as I can live at this on the expense of, for example, you. I really don't care whether you had the last time that dinner or not. But the Prophet of Islam teaches us, saying that none of you is a faithful while your belly is full and your neighbor is hungry. See, it is just rejecting the directly, you know, from, you know, the Islam. So I have to be really considered. Therefore, In this country, I don't like the word I don't care. I do care. I mean, maybe they don't. They do say it unintentionally. I don't care, you know. But it's so much irritating me. I do care. I do care in everything and anything around. I think the mutual respect and knowing our position and then recognizing that one day, that is our common denomination. I will live in this earth. I will die. Right? That's the end or the beginning, however you look at it. So then, utilize the land accordingly, and then be cautious, considerate, and then really recognizing each other's differences and then accepting each every one of us in their own position. I have a lot of the Christian friends and Jewish friends and agnostic atheists. I recognize them as a human being. We are discussing all the philosophical logistics. That's fine, but at the end of the day, we shake hands and we learn from one another. I think that as long as a human being reaches that level, hopefully, in a community level, in a state level, in a country level, in a continent level, probably we will still have differences, because the black and white always exist, day and night always exist, cold and hot is always exist, right? The evil and the good is always exist. It's important how we can, get around.
Yes, sir. Hi, my name's Conrad, and I'm actually the organizer of the May 6th debate on Does God Exist that's next Friday. But I also find a lot of value in this kind of interfaith dialogue, in alliances, and in service together as a community. And my question is regarding the frontiers of science. It was mentioned that one of the reasons why faith and science don't have to be in conflict is that parts of our human experience aren't explainable by science. But potentially, that's temporary. There's been many things that have been beyond the grasp of science in the past that are no longer. How does it affect those alliances when those magisteria are no longer non-overlapping? How do we keep the people currently involved in science advocacy together when science starts taking over and actually talking about literally all the claims that are made by those faiths?
Do you think ethics can be completely explained by science? I mean,
I was
sorry.
referring specifically to kind of human experiences and describing love and the heart via brain and neuroscience activities. That might be a better to keep it specific.
Yeah, no, but I was just wondering, I would see ethics as one thing that science doesn't provide an answer for, how we should behave. Go ahead.
And I think that maybe you were coming from what I said, and I agree that neurobiology is certainly within the realm of the scientific method, but I don't think that the aesthetic and the emotional ever can be, because they're human, individual, idiosyncratic experiences. And we can ask people how many people they love or whom they love and so forth, but again, that's a survey. That's not a kind of science that I do or that I think is the methodology of natural sciences, and never can be.
It seems to me that there have always been points in the past where either science or religion felt like they had all the answers. And what do you know? It wasn't long after that there were new questions without answers. And I'm not convinced that there will ever be a time when the questions are all answered and there will no longer be a need for alliance. There'll always be, I like your term, frontiers, for both religion and science. The universe, as it is an inexhaustible source for pondering and wondering and exploration.
Yes, sir.
Psychologically, what role do you think compartmentalization has to play in this debate between science and religion for the average folk? That they just compartmentalize the two